Congratulations! You have registered and you are now attending the P.R.O Masterclass series of webinars. We call this a P.R.O Masterclass series because it stands for Predictable Retirement Outline. That is what we believe your retirement should be. Predictable. Now, there are 5 webinars in this series. There's one on income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy planning. Now, we believe that these are the 5 parts of retirement that you will need to plan out, have a very detailed, descriptive, step-by-step plan for, in order for you to have a predictable retirement. Now, when you dig into this webinar, I want you to put everything aside. Close all the tabs, make sure that you're in a quiet place, and get a pen and paper ready. We go through a lot of material in each one of these courses, and we go through it pretty quickly. I want you to also keep in mind that these were live at one point, and now what you're watching is a previously recorded webinar. So if you would like to ask any questions during this webinar, to the right of this video you should see a chat box. When you click in there and ask your questions, those questions will be automatically emailed to myself or my team, and somebody will get back to you as soon as possible. Below this video, you will see links to our social media. Please keep in mind that you can go there at any point in time for a lot of free educational content that we like to put out on each one of the social medias to help you with retirement. Now, it's time that we dig into this course that you signed up for. Make sure to check out some of the other ones after you get done with this one. And if you like the content, please let us know. If you would like to hear more about something in particular when it comes to retirement, let us know and we may create a video for that as well. Well, it's time for me to go and for you guys to dig into this webinar. Thanks, and make it a great retirement. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on tonight's class. This is part of our P.R.O Masterclass series. P.R.O standing for Predictable Retirement Outline. And when we look at retirement planning as a whole, we always think of it in 5 parts: income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and then what we're going to talk about tonight, which is legacy planning. Now, this might be a little bit different than what you may expect when it comes to estate planning, but we're going to have a lot of information we're going to go through tonight. To get a little housekeeping out of the way, I would recommend that you close any browser tabs that you have open. Make sure that you are in a quiet location. You've got a pen and a paper ready, and we will dig right in. Now, before we get started, we always have to go through the legal disclosures. We are not part of the Social Security Administration in any way, also not part of the IRS in any way, or any other government agencies for that matter. This is all educational material. We are not giving any specific advice or telling you to act on anything that we talk about tonight, because everybody's situation is very different. And so there is no way for us to give you any good advice without getting to know you and your specific situation. So keep in mind, everything we talk about tonight is purely educational. I always like starting the night with a quote. And if you look at this quote by Pablo Picasso, he's basically going through and telling us that if you want to achieve any goal, you need to have a plan. You need a route to success. And that's what we look at when we're looking at a retirement plan, or in this case, even just a legacy plan, is we need to put a plan in place so that you know the steps to take to reach all of your goals. Well, you may be thinking to yourself already, who am I? Who's this guy talking to me? Well, my name is Jamin Garabedian. I'm a chartered retirement planning counselor. I'm a national Social Security advisor as well, and a former senior portfolio manager for one of the largest firms in the world. What all this means to you basically is that I've spent a lot of time and a lot of extra classes, a lot of study to learn details of retirement planning. And we focus here at Assurance Wealth Management on retirement planning. There's a lot of advisors out there that will manage your investments, manage your portfolios, and they may do a good job, they may not do a good job, I don't know. But when it comes to retirement planning, you need to make sure that you are working with a specialist that specializes in retirement, not just somebody who's going to take care of a portfolio. On a more personal note, I am a father of 3 kids, and depending on when you watch this recording, I've got a 4th one on the way. So you can see here in the picture 3 of them, and then we do have a 4th on the way. So I am an avid golfer, and then one of my favorite accomplishments is the fact that our family plays a lot of board games. And as of right now, I am the reigning Monopoly champion. I've yet to be beat in our house. Maybe the 4th child will grow up and be able to do it, but we'll see. Enough about me. Let's dig into the presentation today and talk about these 2 gentlemen right here. I'm sure some of you know at least one of these 2. The fellow on the right, probably. Well, the thing you might not know is the man on the left, who is famous for delivering a talk that was based off of answering this question. What wisdom would you try to impart to the world if you knew it was your last chance? Now, his name is Randy Pausch. He was a father, a husband, and a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Randy had already been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when he was asked to give his quote-unquote last lecture. This was one in a series where professors would imagine that they were giving their final lesson, and what would they talk about? Well, most people don't deliver one of these under such pressing circumstances, which made his lecture even more compelling. His talk to students at his school was recorded, became a YouTube sensation, and soon he was on Oprah, Good Morning America, and then he finally came out with a book called The Last Lecture. Now, Randy's story is remarkable, partly because it showed great human resilience in the face of personal tragedy. He knew his time on earth was limited. He knew the day he would die, as he said, and it would be like pushing his family off a cliff. So he set out, while still strong, to do what he could to build a net that would catch them. A cushion that would cushion the blow of his departure. I've picked out a few of his notable quotes from his lecture and his book. One of them being, the key question to keep asking is, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all you have. Another one is, be prepared. Luck is truly where preparation meets opportunity. And then the last one is, to be cliche, death is part of life and it's going to happen to all of us. I have the blessing of getting a little bit of an advance notice, and I'm able to optimize my use of time down the home stretch. Not something that most of us can do. Randy died quietly at his home in July of 2008, about 10 months after he gave his last lecture. He was surrounded by his family, and I think it's safe to say that he left his family and children and the world with a deep personal message about his values and beliefs and his wisdom. And not just for his wife and children, but really also his children's children, the chain of generations we all have a link in. I think if you could ever say that someone had a good death, it was certainly Randy Pausch. Now, the other gentleman that we looked at was this man right here, James Gandolfini. The details of Randy's death stand in contrast to those of this man, actor, producer, James Gandolfini. You may remember him as Tony Soprano, the mafia crime boss and lead character from the HBO series The Sopranos. Unlike Randy, James died suddenly at age 51 while on a trip to Italy. It was a shock to his fans and his family. No one saw it coming. Unfortunately, he hadn't done a thorough job planning his affairs and ended up leaving 80% of his estate to his sisters and his daughter in such a way that it triggered a painful $30 million tax bill. And unlike Randy, James Gandolfini didn't get to play a role in writing his final legacy. Instead, his ending had a strong resemblance to the controversial last scene of The Sopranos. If you were a fan of the show, you remember Tony arranges to meet his family for dinner at a local diner. First, his wife Carmela arrives, then his son AJ. Tony orders some fried onion rings for the table while they all await his daughter, Meadow, to show up. Tony keeps looking at the door, checking for his daughter's arrival. The camera jump cuts to his daughter outside, trying to park her car. And then back to Tony. The tension builds. He keeps looking up. We're all wondering who's going to come through that door. Is it going to be Meadow or a mafia hitman? And then finally, the screen goes black. The finale to a 6-season series ends. The storyline left unresolved. No deathbed scene, no final words, just a jarring cut to black. Just as James Gandolfini's real life ended. This also ended in a cut black scene. So, in the opposite manner of Randy Pausch, James Gandolfini didn't get to write his story for the ages. I hope you can see in our little tale of two families here a hint at topics we're going to be touching on tonight, namely the importance and seriousness of thinking through your legacy and your planning for the next generation. It's never too soon to do that. You may be wondering, why is a financial professional up here today talking about legacy planning for generations? Not only is it that we focus on retirement planning and legacy planning is a big part of that, but I do this as a service to my clients and to my community because I've seen some difficult, unhappy situations when families don't think about these issues, when no legacy planning is done. We see a range of unhappy outcomes that often impact multiple generations, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Of course, we don't want that to happen to you and your families, so that's why I do this presentation. I also want to assure you that this is not a sales presentation. You are not going to hear me stand up here and pitch anything to you. Please note that I am always trying to respect people's time, so I won't be taking questions today during the presentation. As I've mentioned, there is a chat box to the right. Feel free to answer or ask any of your questions there. They will come to us directly, and we will get those answered for you. Before we end tonight, I will be covering a lot of information about legacy planning so that you can better be prepared when you start your planning. And I'll be extending an invitation to you to start developing your own legacy plan and answering questions about your specific situation, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. I'm excited tonight to be talking to you about legacy planning. And when it comes to this topic, it's not the stuffy old version of traditional estate planning. Instead, we see legacy planning in a broader, more positive light that will help you find the meaning in your life and make sure it counts for something to your loved ones who will stay behind a while longer. As we saw with Randy Posh in his last lecture, he recounted his childhood dreams, the outstanding people he had met in his life, and the lessons that he had learned along the way. The lecture has been seen and read by millions of people. Now that's a legacy. And yours may not be as far-reaching as his, but it will be just as meaningful to your family and those that you leave behind and that you love. So let's continue with trying to understand the seriousness of the problem many families face here, and then look at some solutions that we can start to help you and your family avoid the worst kind of results. We can see here that one aspect of a problem we face. Many people haven't thought through how they want their money and estate handled after they're gone. They think they have forever. What could go wrong? And not reflected here are people who have given it some thought, but not recently or not fully, as in the case of James Gandolfini. You see here that this Gallup poll shows 55% of adults don't have a will. Now, if you don't have a will or a trust or anything in place, how is anybody to know where your money's supposed to go or where your assets are supposed to go or those artifacts that you cherish that may have personal, deep meaning to your family, where they're supposed to go? But things do go wrong. Maybe you died before you got everything set up. You got hit by a bus before you even had a chance to tell people that you loved them, much less write a will or start writing down your memories. It's a terrible thought, right? Well, let's just consider what could happen in the aftermath of your untimely death. Your family is left grieving and in the dark about what you own, where everything is, and what your wishes are. Think about your closest next of kin, your spouse or your child. First, they're in shock to learn of your untimely death. They start going through your papers. What are they going to find? A neat folder marked "open in case of my death" with all of your assets listed, wishes clearly spelled out? Or are they going to get a hodgepodge of papers that makes no sense to anyone but you, and now you're gone? Or your estate planning documents are missing, incomplete, or in conflict with one another. Perhaps you never got around to making a will, so no one knows who you wanted your assets to go to. Or if you did sign a will, maybe it conflicts with your beneficiary designations. This happens a lot. People update their will when they get remarried, but forget to update their IRA or other investment beneficiaries and still leave everything to their ex-spouse. Now let me ask you, if you died tomorrow, how would your assets be distributed? Do you even know? Family members probably start arguing over what you wanted. Granted, you're not around to see this turmoil, but I'm asking you to imagine it right now. Without clear instructions from you, what would your family members say to one another? Would there be arguments over what you would and wouldn't have? You may have heard of the normal, loving families who turned on one another after a parent died without a will, and it can bring out the worst in people. If there is no will or trust, the estate goes into probate. This means that the court is going to take over and divide the assets based off of state law. This may or may not be what you wanted. Probate fees are deducted from your estate, leaving less for your heirs. And if you were to die tomorrow, do you know if your estate would owe estate taxes? Perhaps one of the worst things to contemplate about sudden death is leaving special sentiments unsaid. There are people who say, "I love you" at the end of every phone conversation, just to make sure the last thing they said if they get hit by a bus is that they love the person they are talking to. But that doesn't really do the job of telling your spouse, your children, your grandchildren how truly you feel about them. Let me ask you, if you got hit or some sort of accident happened tomorrow, what things will you wish you had said to people that you love? And in the end, the impact of your life is diminished. Between the confusion, family squabbles, messy estate planning, and all the things you'd wish you'd said but didn't, your legacy comes up short of what you'd probably want it to be. The aftermath of your death is not nearly as positive as it could have been. Well, you're probably thinking to yourself right now, what else could go wrong, Jamin? You've just listed all these terrible things. Well, legacy planning is, in a modern sense, is a two-phase process that does away with the worst aspects of estate planning and helps you plan for your legacy. For some, a fate worse than death would be incapacity. You suffer a stroke, you get hit, by a vehicle, or rather than dying, you end up in a coma. In some ways, this is worse than dying, unprepared, because you have to go on living. So who will make decisions about your care? Someone you love, someone you trust? Or will you be at the mercy of someone you don't even know because you didn't set things up properly? Here's what can go wrong. Your medical wishes are not honored because no one knows what they are. Hospitals are obligated to do whatever is necessary to keep people alive, even if it involves ventilators, feeding tubes, etc. If this is not what you would want, you have to state those wishes now. If you want to appoint a loved one to make medical decisions on your behalf, you have to set that up now, while you are still of sound mind and body. And here's what else. Your money is frozen. Your bills go unpaid. Your investments are left unattended because you never signed a power of attorney appointing a trusted person to act on your behalf. No one else has the authority to transfer money or pay bills or do anything with your finances as long as you are incapacitated. So here's a problem. People equate estate planning with death planning and therefore block it out and never do anything or not enough. The quote here sums it up. One of the greatest obstacles in estate planning is the perpetuating of death denial. Most people don't want to plan for post-death lives because death is a scary topic to even think about. Now, this is true both on a financial level, but also probably more importantly on an emotional or spiritual level. That lifetime of experiences, hard-earned wisdom, and insight that make up our values never get discussed and never get passed on to the next generation. And that's the real loss for everyone. Now you may be thinking, well, my family knows how I feel about them. And I'm not the best-selling author or Hollywood movie star with tens of millions in the bank. So what's it matter to me if I don't take this issue seriously? What are the consequences? Well, the consequences of having no estate plan are tragic. As Lawrence Greenberg notes here, heirs may be subjected to a number of obstacles, such as probate, creditors, lawsuit, judgments, and legal fees, all of which can compromise the value of your legacy. So let's look at some common problems that arise when no one thinks about estate planning. No will or trust. They overlook provisions such as guardianship for minors. No tax planning. Financial strain, cash shortages for survivors. Also, sometimes decisions are not communicated to the next generation. Details not revealed until after death. Family tension arises after the will is read. Reluctance to make a plan or update a plan. It's really not a good picture, is it? Which is why attorneys, accountants, and financial professionals have been pressing their clients for years to do estate planning. The benefits of estate planning are very real. It spells out your healthcare wishes. Possessions go to your heirs, who you choose, without wrangling or dispute. It's going to avoid additional unplanned legal expenses, and it's going to provide for loved ones not otherwise protected. But traditional estate planning often doesn't capture the fullness of our lives or our values. So what's missing are the intangible assets that we've collected, often the fruits of a life well lived. They include two types of things not included in traditional estate planning, such as character assets, which are your values, health, spirituality, heritage, purpose, life experiences, talents, plans for giving, and intellectual assets, which are your business systems, alliances, ideas, skills, traditions, reputation, and wisdom. Now, you're possibly saying to yourself, that's a pretty grim picture. We don't want that to happen in our family. Is there a way to achieve all these things, not just the nuts and bolts of traditional estate planning? And the answer is yes. It's called legacy planning. And it recognizes that we are all much more than just our physical assets accounted for in our estate plan. So here's our definition of legacy planning. It's a modern, intentional, two-phase process that does away with the worst aspects of estate planning and helps your legacy. So generational planning or legacy planning, let's try that again. So legacy planning has two objectives. The first objective is a process for passing on a family's tangible wealth and assets. The second objective is conveying your family's values and history to the next generation. Both are done for the benefit of the next generation. It's also important to say that legacy planning is not driven by documents in a way of a stuffier estate planning process. And so, in thinking about the people closest to you, here are some thoughts on key considerations to successful legacy planning for the generations. First, consider your spouse if you're married. If you were to die first, you need to ensure sufficient income for the rest of your spouse's life, maybe through insurance or just making sure there are enough assets to draw from. You also may want to make sure whichever of you goes first, the surviving spouse would be able to manage the finances alone. You know, we see many cases where the husband makes the investment decisions, the wife pays the bills. This is a natural division of labor in a marriage, and they're each doing what they do best. Then one of them dies, and the other must take over without having been trained to do so. In the successful legacy, a married couple, while they are both alive, plan ahead and make sure that either spouse can carry on and manage the finances regardless of who goes first. Your children need to be prepared for their inheritance. We've all heard stories about trust fund babies and inheritors who have no appreciation or respect for the money that was left to them. Without the proper guidance, their tendencies are to spend it rather than preserving it for their own future or future generations. Inheritance planning starts with an understanding of basic values upon which the inheritance was built, which is to preserve and grow your family's wealth. These values need to be passed on to their kids. Then there are the practical matters of how to specifically invest the money, how to withdraw it without incurring unnecessary taxes and fees. All of this can be done through a plan. As for the grandchildren, you want them to understand how you lived and what you lived for. Sometimes it's easier to skip a generation when passing on these values. Grandchildren usually have a greater appreciation than children do for what life was like when you were young and what you learned from your experiences. So seize the opportunity now to start sharing family stories and conveying some of those memories and values you grew up with. And then finally, think about all the people that you've touched in your life. Think about the causes that you care for, the organizations that you're doing good work with, and then how you can contribute to them now and in the future. Maybe you'd like to leave something to them so they can continue their good works. Naturally, you may be saying to yourself, okay, this makes sense, but how can I do this in a way that's not overwhelming or complicated or extremely expensive? Well, you don't have to be overwhelmed. Follow a 6-step legacy planning process to start leaving your mark on the next generation. Now, let me take you through a quick overview of these 6 steps. Step 1 is plan for incapacity. And to do this, you need 2 important documents. Now, incapacity planning isn't so easy. It's surprising everyone hasn't does it. Now, incapacity planning is so easy, it's surprising everyone hasn't done it. People of all ages should do it because an accident or a stroke could happen to anyone at any time. There are forms for this. For healthcare, all you have to do is state a few simple wishes about how you would want to be cared for and name a person to interact with the doctors and make these medical decisions on your behalf. This may be your spouse or one of your children or a close friend. For finances, you would simply sign a power of attorney, giving another person legal authority to act on your behalf. This would allow them to pay bills, transfer money, and do what's needed to keep your finances in order during the time that you are unable to do it yourself. Again, it can be a spouse, an adult child, a close friend, or a trusted professional. You must be competent to sign these forms, which is why we want you to do it now. This is step 1 of the legacy planning process. Once you have this checked off and feel much better about it, then you'll be able to tackle step 2, which is to get organized. You know, you've been meaning to do this. Or maybe you're already pretty well organized, but not in the way that would make sense to your loved ones, or if you suddenly passed away. But why do we get organized? Well, your objective in this step is to prepare for the real business of estate planning. First of all, you need to identify all your property you own, so you'll know how to divvy it up amongst your beneficiaries. This includes all your savings, investment accounts, retirement accounts, real estate, business interest, significant personal property like jewelry and artwork, everything that you have. Before you ever sit down with an attorney to have your estate planning documents drawn up, you will need to have this list. Another reason to do this is to determine if your estate will be subject to estate taxes. If it is, that is, if the total value of your estate exceeds the estate tax exemption amount, either now or what you think it may be down the road, you will want to talk to a professional about some of the legal ways that you can reduce or avoid estate taxes. If you were to go on the internet, you could read about so many celebrities who didn't do the proper planning and whose estates owed millions and millions of dollars in estate taxes that could have easily been avoided. If you don't read about a particular celebrity's estate plan, it probably means that they did something right. They set up a trust, that they both saved estate taxes and kept their affairs private. And, of course, you want to make things easy on your spouse or children. Make it so they have access to your important papers and passwords. Help them know what to do first, like take care of your pets or get your mail. In a non-legal letter to your survivors, you can say anything you want. You can give funeral instructions. You can tell them what you want done with your Facebook accounts. Tell them where you keep your home. In a non-legal letter to your survivors, you can say anything you want. You can give funeral instructions. You can tell them what to do with your Facebook account. Or you can tell them that you left a key under the mat at home to get in. You can tell them where the key or combination to your safe at home is. Anything you want. And we can help you with this. Now, part 3, you'll be thinking about the people you love and the causes you care about. This is in preparation for part 4, which is the real business of estate planning. For some of you, part 3 will be easy. You want to leave everything to your spouse, and you have 1 or 2 favorite charities that you would like to support. But you have to think about contingencies. What if your spouse goes before you do? Do you want everything to go to your kids? Do you divide it equally among them or distribute according to their needs? What about grandchildren? What about other relatives or friends? Anybody else that you want to be part of your estate? Or some of your prized possessions? Where do you want those to go? And what if you have a special situation, like a child you don't feel is ready to handle inheritance, or a special needs child who would lose out on medical benefits if they were a large inheritance? These are some things that need to be considered before you start working on your estate planning documents. The more you have thought through your family and charitable wishes, the more efficient the estate planning process will be, and the more money you will save. Also, in this step is an important process of preparing beneficiaries for their inheritance. Now, some families may want to be completely open about who's going to get what, while others may prefer to be more secretive to avoid family battles. Maybe it's better to have those family battles. If they're going to happen, while you're still around, you can mediate. In any case, you want people who will be inheriting your assets to know how to manage them, to carry on the intent to preserve and grow the assets and not just spend them frivolously on things or lose them to taxes. This is the time to talk to your spouse and your kids about what they might get if you die and give them some lessons on how to manage that inheritance. This will be extremely valuable part of your legacy. Also, when you set up a trust and a will, there are ways of managing those assets from the grave so that you can ensure that your beneficiaries do not spend things frivolously. Now we get into the traditional part of estate planning. All those decisions that you made in part 3 about who should get what will need to be legalized. That is, there will need to be a mechanism to transfer those assets to your loved ones in a legal manner. So let's take a look at this. Now, this isn't always done via will. Sometimes you can transfer assets through account titling. If you hold title as a joint tenants with right of survivorship and one of the joint tenants dies, the property will automatically transfer to the other joint tenant without going through probate. Another way is through beneficiary designations. If you have an IRA, you signed a beneficiary designation in which you name the person or persons who should inherit the IRA if you die. This also allows assets to pass directly to the beneficiaries outside of probate, and regardless of what your will says. Now, there are several legal ways to transfer assets to loved ones after death, but they all need to be coordinated. You may have some accounts titled jointly. You may have signed beneficiary designations. You may also need to have a trust, depending on how complex your situation is, and whether or not your estate is subject to estate taxes. You also need a will to pick up the leftovers. Some people's estate plans are very simple. They barely need to see a lawyer at all. They can do everything through account titling, beneficiary designations, and a simple will. Other people do need more legal advice. We can help you make the determination and refer to an estate planning attorney when we get to the stage of the process. Or if you have an attorney you already work with, we will work with them to help coordinate things on our end, such as making sure your accounts are titled properly and your beneficiaries are up to date. Depending on how much you thought you gave to your beneficiaries in part 3, this step should be pretty quick and straightforward. It's a matter of executing the wishes you already identified. Laying all the groundwork in part 3 will save you on the legal fees. At the same time, you don't want to rush anything. Talking with a professional can sometimes make you aware of possibilities you didn't know about, such as planning for contingencies or drawing up the documents so that they can't be contested. Good professionals at estate planning definitely earn their fees. Now, we get to the fun part. Creating your family legacy. This is where you really make your life count for something by leaving behind a piece of yourself. How do you do this? Will be up to you. We have worksheets and guidelines that you can get started. You might start by simply capturing memories, writing down certain thoughts, such as what you want your children and grandchildren to know about you. You may be planning to compile family photos or favorite recipes to hand down. Maybe you have a special skill, such as gardening or woodworking, that you would like to pass on to certain family members. Now is the time to start thinking about these intangible assets that will make your legacy so valuable to your family. And part 6 comes later, but it's no less essential than part 1 through 5. It's great that you were doing all this planning early, long before you plan to leave this earth, but that means a lot can happen between now and then. So you will need to keep an eye on your plan and revise it if anything changes. Your plan is not set in stone. As your family composition changes, you will want to revisit your plan. Whenever there's a marriage, a divorce, a death, a birth, you want to take a look at your plan. Or you might change your mind about something. You can always amend your documents for any reason at all. Remember, having the wrong people inherit your money is almost worse than no estate plan. So that's our 6-part legacy planning process, and we're getting close to finishing, so I want to be brief. We started looking at the differences between Randy Pausch and the story of James Gandolfini's story. And the key takeaway there was that your legacy is going to be written no matter what, for better or for worse. So let's make sure that we can control the final narrative of our life, because things can happen suddenly. And we saw the consequences of not being prepared. The pain, the confusion, the anger among family members. Then we were introduced to the concept of legacy planning and saw how it differs a little bit from the traditional estate planning. And that led us to the understanding that the first step in legacy planning is to ensure our tangible wealth and assets get left to the right people or organizations. And then to do that, we've just introduced you to 6 major steps in the legacy planning process. As you look at those 6 steps, you're possibly thinking, that sounds like a lot to achieve. And look, I feel that way too, because it is. But we found over the years is that when we work together and guide people through a legacy planning process, they experience 2 things. The first one is great relief that it's done. And the second is a new excitement and renewed energy to focus on the non-financial aspects of their legacy plan. This is the reflective part. It's not legal, it's not business. It's the part where we get to look back on our personal journey and share the stories that we carry in our hearts. This is our gift to the next generation. They may be words or stories, pictures or actions. They may provide hope. They may provide healing. But just as important are the things we say and do that bring us meaning, because we realize that we are the carriers of wisdom for our family. And from generation to generation, each of us is a link in the chain that binds our families together. And that link is the mark we leave on our legacy. And that's why I think many of you are here tonight and why I'd like to make a suggestion. Let's work together. Hopefully you are all motivated now to get started on your legacy plan. So let's maintain that motivation by taking action. Here's the idea. Working together, we will develop a plan for doing many things that need to be done. One of the reasons people don't get around to estate planning is that the task seems too overwhelming and they don't know where to start. So we would like to break that into chunks where we set some goals, establish a timetable for implementing them. And as you see an example here, in week 1, we might sign your healthcare directive. Week 2, we might sign the power of attorney for financial decisions. We have a checklist of things that we need to get done in order for your plan to succeed. And together we can go through that list and check things off as they're done. Working together will help you stay on track. We can also share resources. If you need a referral to an estate planning attorney or a tax advisor, we can introduce you to some of the professionals we work with whom we know are good at what they do. By working together, we can hold each other accountable. We'll have frequent check-ins, deadlines for dates. This is all for your benefit, to keep you motivated and engaged so that you will carry through your plans and you will get that legacy plan to ensure that your legacy is passed on how you want. So imagine how you're going to feel when your legacy is all set. A trusted person is ready to step in and help with healthcare decisions, financial dealings, if it becomes necessary. Your records are all organized and accessible to your loved ones. Your spouse and other loved ones will be provided for after death. By leaving behind both tangible and intangible assets, you will be remembered for your unique contributions to your family and the world. Legacy planning is not hard. You just kind of need to get started. And so what I want to offer you guys is something I talked about at the very beginning. For anybody who's gone through this entire webinar, I want to thank you for staying. Or if you've seen some of our other webinars in the pro planning process, I want to offer you 2 consultations. They're an hour long each, and we will go through everything that you need for your retirement plan. They're going to start in the first visit with reviewing your current income plan, investment plan, your tax plan, your healthcare plan, and see if you have a legacy plan. In the second meeting, we will discuss the analysis that we've done for you. We're going to take a look at your risk, your cost, see if you have enough income in retirement, see what your Social Security looks like, taxes, RMDs, and again, your legacy. Now, before we get started with these 2 meetings, we do require that you schedule a 15-minute phone call. This will allow us to answer any general questions that you have, cover the process in more detail with you, and to make sure that not only are we a good fit for you, but you're a good fit for us. We don't want to be wasting your time or ours. So down below, you'll see a chance where you can click on a link, schedule a 15-minute phone call that works for you. How much is this planning and how much are these visits going to cost you? Absolutely nothing. We're going to go through the analysis for all 5 sections of your retirement plan at absolutely no cost for you. Who is this for? Well, anyone that doesn't want to worry about their finances in retirement, anyone that has questions about their current retirement plan, or anybody that's currently working with a financial professional that may not be specializing in retirement. They may just be a portfolio manager. Who is this not for? Anybody that's okay just hoping everything works out for them. Anybody that's not willing to make changes for the better. That if we can show you some issues that you may have, some gaps, some inefficiencies, and you don't want to make changes, you want to leave everything as is, look, that's fine. Save us both some time and don't even schedule a call. I'm going to leave you with this quote. Have a bias towards action. Let's see something happen now. You can break this big plan into small steps and take the first step right away. Your first step is just getting started. I want to thank you guys again for being here. I hope this was very informational for you. I hope this was very helpful for you. If you would like to see some of the other educational content that we have available, go check us out on social media. The link should be down below. Or you can always go to our website at assurancewm.com, shoot us an email at info@assurancewm.com, or give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to talking with each and every one of you and helping you create that legacy planning. And furthermore, make it a great retirement. Thank you.